Hi guys, calling back again this week. Now, when I was a kid, we used to watch a lot of movies on my days off from school. um, and we had the same four channels that everybody else had back in the 70s and 80s. We had the old broken down color TV. And on top of that, we had a little black and white TV that was actually the only functioning television that we had most of the time. Um, Now, one of those movies that used to come on television back in those days on the weekends. Sometimes they would come on late on Friday nights. Um, was a movie called Easy Rider, and here I have the Easy Rider soundtrack from 1969. Um, this went all the way to number 6 on the Billboard charts, and it went gold in 1970, I believe. Um, this was always one of those memorable movies for me because I always thought it was really cool with these guys on their choppers going across country and doing their thing with all the 60s music that they had in the movie. And some of the songs that are on this are The Pusher by Steppenwolf, Born to Be Wild by Steppenwolf, The Weight by Smith. Now, in the movie, the original song The Weight was done by a group called The Band, and apparently there was some sort of licensing issues during that time with that song that came out the year before by the band, and they couldn't get that song in the movie, so they had it redone by a band called The Smiths, which I don't really know who that is. I haven't researched them. It also has the Byrds, the Holy Model Rounders, Fraternity of Man, the Jimi Hendrix Experience, the Electric Prunes, and Roger McQuinn. Uh, and here's some of the scenes from the movie on the back of the cover. I always remembered my uncle had a poster of this right here on his wall in his room back then. I was a little kid, but he must have been a teenager at the time, and he had this poster up in his room. Um, and there's Jack Nicholson, and a scene down here with Dennis Hopper, and I forget this lady's name. She's an actress in the movie. Um, but Karen Black, that's her name. Karen Black. It has the cast right there. But this is the Easy Rider record, and I always we'll be showing some soundtracks off and on. Now, some trivia from back then was the big songs or the top songs of the time were Aquarius, Let the Sunshine In by the Fifth Dimension. The top movies were Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Midnight Cowboy, and Valley of the Dolls. Midnight Cowboy was another favorite of mine that we would watch back then because it sort of reminded me of our living situation at the time. We lived in this really apartment building that was probably built in the 40s, and it was all made out of bricks, and it was sort of old and run down, and it made all kinds of creaks and weird noises at nighttime because there was like this huge boiler down in the basement. And always my great uncle at the time was the maintenance man there, and during the winter time sometimes that big boiler would break down and he'd have to run down there, and I don't know what he did, if he threw wood in the if he threw wood in its belly or what he did, but somehow he got the thing running again. And it was full of cockroaches all the time, even though we were very clean. I thought there wasn't any food laying around or anything. It's just the place always seemed to be infested with cockroaches. You couldn't put your drink down on the floor or anywhere. You'd have to cover it up with something because next thing you know, there'd be 5 or 10 roaches swimming around in your drink. Um, and then sometimes it would be sitting around without electricity, and you could see your breath when you were talking to each other. No electricity, no light, sometimes no heat. But those were always memorable and fun times to me because even though we were poor, we always visited with each other, especially at night. You know, we didn't hardly have any television or any kind of other entertainment besides records and the radio back then. And we would all sit around late at night visiting with each other. And that was really some of my best memories from back then. Um, the big wheel tricycle was introduced, and I used to have one of those. The big wheel. If you guys remember those, it was the big plastic like tricycle thing, and mine was red, yellow, and blue, I believe. And it had this plastic like brake thing on the side, and you pulled that lever. Well, first of all, you get yourself really going, and then you pull that lever and kind of swing, and you could like do a little spin on it. um, the Beatles. They wanted to have an album called Everest, but they didn't want to go and take pictures at Mount Everest. So they changed the name of the album to Abbey Road, and they ended up taking the pictures right outside their studio, and that's a very famous cover all of you have already seen and know about. A memorable quote is, I'm walking here," and that was Dustin Hoffman from Midnight Cowboy. Another memorable quote is, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," and that's from the moon landing, which also happened in 1969. And a board game that came out then was called Ants in the Pants, and I think I had one of those later in the 70s. It was a pair of plastic pants. I think they were blue with red suspenders or something, and there were like these little plastic ant things on the inside. They were almost like it was almost like a game of tiddlywinks, if I remember it right. You kind of flick the little plastic bug and see if you can get it to jump inside these plastic pants, and that was Ants in the Pants. Now, I don't have a board game that has motorcycles in it, but I do have a board game with cars, and that's a board game that came out in 1986, published by Milton Bradley, and it's called Thunder Road. It's the Ram and Wreck survival game, and this is actually a knockoff of sort of Mad Max, but they couldn't use the Mad Max title on the board game itself, so they called it Thunder Road. And it basically is Mad Max. You've got little cars, and you're trying to wreck each other off of the road while you're racing to see who can be the last car on the board. And here's the back of it. I don't know if it's going to show up because it's green, and my green screen might mess with it. But there's some kids there. You can tell it's quite a large board to play with. It has two parts. And here's that board right here. Thunder Road. This is actually, this is your road and your tracks. And you move this by spaces, just like checkers or something. But you're using little cars, and you're trying to race each other to the end. And it ain't all going to fit in the frame here. But there's the board. Here's some of the little cars that came with it. There's 4 different colors for 4 players. And this is kind of the like Mad Max's car here. Little plastic cars. And here's another one that looks kind of like a rocket car. And also it has helicopters in it that can go down and attack your cars, and everybody gets one of those if they want, whenever they can use it once. And the way you move around on it is with these dice. There's 2 sets of yellow and 2 sets of red, and you sort of shake those up just like in a normal dice game, and whatever number comes up, that's how many spaces you move. And also you use those dice to attack your opponent. Say you get next to your opponent's car and you roll these dice, and that determines how you attack him, because each player's car has a different value number. Like one will have a value of 5, and if you get 5 on those dice, that means you knocked him off the road or knocked him over. And if you get below that, it didn't work, and he can keep going and try to race you towards the end of the board game. And that's Thunder Road. right here. From 1986, Milton Bradley. Uh, this is a game that would be good for upgrading, I think. You could go, instead of using these little plastic cars, you could go get yourself some Hot Wheels or something like that and paint them up or whatever to look like cars that are from the apocalyptic sand thing, like in Mad Max, and even the helicopters. And they even make, or they did make, little die-cast cars from the movie Mad Max, but those are real expensive. And I think it would be cheaper just to paint up your own cars if you so wish to. And that's my video for today. Thanks for joining me. If you have any suggestions of anything you want me to show, album-wise, or talk about, or if there's any games that you remember having when you were a kid, leave that in the comments below. It could be Monopoly. A lot, just about everybody's played Monopoly, Scrabble, Yahtzee, those types of things, or even cards, like you maybe remember playing poker and war and things. We used to play a lot of war when I was a kid with playing cards. But that's my video for today. Thank you, Colin, over and out, and Weirdos Unite. Poof! Or poof!